Rumour mill is churning once again, this time triggered by an article linking Ferrari to Lewis Hamilton. A $40 million deal to sit aside preferably to Charles Leclerc, but if not, then Carlos Sainz. This comes just a few weeks after we had a bunch of paddock talk about Mercedes approaching Charles. These rumours were dismissed, but of course they were. They always are. Speculative conjecture till they come true. Right, Otmar? Lewis's Mercedes deal ends at the end of this year, Charles's ends at the end of 2024. Neither have extended yet and contracts can get bought out. So today I wanted to chuck out a lean edit and weigh up the options. Who wins from this? Does it make any sense to anyone from Ferrari's, Mercedes, Leclerc's and Hamilton's point of views? Let's talk about it. 3 options here as far as I'm concerned. Everyone stays put is one. Leclerc and Hamilton swap, that's another. And Hamilton goes and takes Sainz's position at Ferrari. You could maybe argue that Sainz to Mercedes, that could be a swap as well, but that seems a little bit less maybe realistic to me. I'm also assuming this all happens at the end of this season because that's when Lewis's contract is up. Again, Charles does have one until 2024, but that can be bought out. Of those 3 options, what works best for all of the individual parties involved? Let's start by talking about Mercedes. Phenomenal driver combination on their hands right now. Even if you don't like Lewis, even if you don't like George, you can't deny that. Come on, 7 world titles for Sir Lewis Hamilton, arguably the best to ever do it. Statistically, the best to ever do it. Still doing bits at 38 years of age. You've got George Russell, who's come into that team from Williams and completely stepped up to the plate. I think Lewis had the measure of him last season, but this year, there is little to nothing in it between the two of them. 4 full years of experience under his helmet by now. Time flies, doesn't it? The problem for Mercedes, of course, is if things were a bit different, if they had a car that could fight at the front of the field, would things be so harmonious within that team? Absolutely not, surely. There's no clear number 1 driver. It's not like the Bottas days where you could always trust Lewis would eventually, once you got to half season, mid-season point, he would have established a lead over Bottas and would take away with it and win all them world championships in a Mercedes. George has shown already that he's not prepared to be second fiddle to Lewis Hamilton, to nobody, and good for him because he's got the ability, clearly he's got the talent to show, so why should he settle for being a number 2? If you want to fight a championship fight and you've got other teams with other top drivers in that fight as well, kind of need a number 1 and 2. Mercedes right now don't have that. But the thing is, swapping Lewis for Charles doesn't fundamentally change that for Mercedes. You've got Leclerc and Russell, which on vibes would be an incredible teammate pairing. I'd love to see that, but you've still got 2 drivers that want to be number 1. You've still got 2 drivers that would fight tooth and nail. However, what you are doing from a Mercedes point of view is somewhat future-proofing your team. Ultimately, you are swapping out a driver who's 13 years older than the other. For 2 drivers who are, Leclerc, Hamilton, for me, Leclerc's probably edging it pace-wise. As a total, as a complete package, I'd give it to Lewis, but all the ingredients are there for Charles Leclerc to be right up there with Lewis Hamilton in terms of achievement. It just needs to be at the right team to actually get those titles. It also probably works out as a net gain because you are taking Charles Leclerc away from a direct rival. Okay, so if you keep Lewis and say you get another 2, maybe 3 years out of him, Charles could be at Ferrari for 10 years and would stay at the foreseeable. This feels like it could be an opportunity as Lewis starts to wind up his career. Because look, yes, Lewis could go on well into his 40s. You look at Fernando Alonso, but Fernando's the exception to the rule. Typically, we don't see that. And I would be surprised if we saw that from Lewis. I could be wrong, but I'll be surprised. Leclerc swapping with Hamilton does not give Mercedes a clear 1-2 driver dynamic. However, again, just that opportunity cost of Leclerc potentially being available, that might never come around again. And to have Leclerc and Russell, like in terms of talent, that would for sure in my mind be the most talented driver combination on the grid. Yes, they would be losing an absolute icon in Lewis Hamilton, but he's 38 now and you have to consider these things as a team. You can't stay emotionally attached to drivers forever. Obviously, Lewis has huge marketing pull and there's a lot surrounding Lewis which makes him an incredibly valuable asset to that team. But again, Charles Leclerc, he is so good. He does overdrive sometimes, I get that, but he's so good. I think I would have to take it. I think if Charles was available, the prospect of Leclerc Russell would just be so good. Even if you don't have a number 1, 2, I think I'd go for it. All right, what about the Scuderia then? What works best for Ferrari? In my opinion, they pretty much have the exact ideal 1-2 dynamic right now. Points might not reflect that, but Charles is comfortably enough ahead of Carlos. He's got 2-3 tenths on him most of the time in qualifying. He's far enough ahead that it keeps Carlos motivated and he will be up there on the odd occasion, but it's not so close that if Charles wants to mount a title fight in a Ferrari when he's got the car, that Carlos isn't going to get in his way. Charles has that X factor, no doubt, and Ferrari are perfectly aware of that, and they're probably, pretty aware of the fact that because they're not giving him a top fighting car, that he is going to be pushing these 101% occasions where it does occasionally. Most of the time he nails it and he pulls off unreal. I mean, Baku qualifying P1 in both of those sprint and the real qualifying event, incredible job from Charles. But you have to accept that sometimes he's going to go a bit wrong. He is only human. Now in this article, apparently Ferrari's preference is to have Leclerc alongside Hamilton, which is pretty mad to me, because then you're almost inviting two number one drivers, manufacturing a issue potentially, especially if they're able to fight at the front, which obviously that is the plan. They're not just going to be happy with being P2 all the time, or P3 to Aston Martin, should I say. Charles was their boy, but the whole point of bringing Lewis Hamilton in would be to deliver him an 8-4 title. That's the whole reason Lewis would want to make that move. You don't want to find yourself in a 2007 McLaren situation when you had Hamilton and Alonso scrapping so much that Kimi Raikkonen in the Ferrari came through and won it all. This time it would be probably Max in a Red Bull, right? Don't forget, Max Verstappen is the best driver in F1 right now, in my opinion, and the Red Bull is quite clearly the best car in F1 right now. So all of this comes with the assumption that they've got to not just catch but outperform Red Bull, which is a ridiculous ask seemingly right now. What I will say though is that, oh man, Hamilton Leclerc as a driver combination, that would be immaculate vibes. Oh my goodness. Like, Verstappen Hamilton is chaos, right? And that's not going to happen. But Hamilton Leclerc, I would kind of love to see that. But ultimately, if Ferrari want to win stuff, is that the right approach? Kind of bringing in a driver who's going to challenge Charles? If they want to win a driver's championship anyway, I don't think it is. Look, maybe Hamilton, alongside Sainz, if Leclerc was going to go to the other way. Again, that move would have to be instigated by Mercedes, because I don't see the value in, Ferrari getting rid of Leclerc for Hamilton when Hamilton is probably going to retire in the next few years. Whereas Leclerc, they could easily get another 10 years out of him. That just doesn't make any sense to me when they're so close in terms of performance. But then again, maybe you bring Hamilton in along Sainz, you've still got a 1-2 dynamic, and then you wait for Ollie Behrman to make his way up. He's already in F2, get into that Ferrari seat, and then he's the future. Boom, job done. Watch my video on Ollie if you haven't already. No one watched it, so I'd appreciate it. Thank you. What about for Lewis? What makes most sense for Lewis? Because yes, the Mercedes right now is struggling. It's slower than Ferrari. It has been for the second season in a row now. And past success does not correlate one-to-one with current and future success. Just ask Williams. Who knows if they've got a direction at the minute, right? I mean, ideally they do for the competitiveness of the sport. That would be great. But also, with that relatively small gap of ATR time relative to Red Bull, it's a huge job for Mercedes, not just to settle on a direction that works, but understanding that direction and then catching up to Red Bull. That's gonna take time, unfortunately. Lewis said, didn't he, recently on a video that his favourite teammate is Valtteri Bottas that he's had throughout his career. Now, is that in part because Valtteri's clearly a great guy, really nice bloke, really sound, down to earth? Of course. Is it also in part because Lewis had the measure of him almost continuously throughout their time together? I'm sure that plays a part, right? A teammate, you don't want your teammate to be beating you. That's not a good thing. You don't want a teammate who's going to challenge you. And unfortunately for Lewis, George is that teammate right now. It's not just enough for Lewis to bank on Mercedes giving him that top car to fight with. He's then also got to beat George, who has been able to outperform Lewis many a time over this last, season and a half that have been together at Mercedes. If he swapped with Leclerc, went to Ferrari alongside Sainz, he would have the measure over Sainz way more, in my opinion, than he does over George Russell. That will make the move enticing. Lewis clearly has a connection with Mercedes that goes way back. I mean, even the McLaren Mercedes days that were still a Mercedes-powered car. He's always driven Mercedes-powered cars throughout his entire career. Does he throw caution to the wind, and does he go for the dream move that so many drivers love and lust for? I mean, is what Dad Anthony Hamilton, when he was manager, said that he would love to have seen Lewis drive for Ferrari one day. Ferrari do lack that cutting edge, but maybe someone like Lewis coming in would help remedy that. Look at what Schumacher did. Michael Schumacher went into that team. They hadn't won a championship in 21 years. And with his experience, with his German efficiency, turned things around. I mean, Lewis is the most experienced driver out there behind Fernando, of course. He's won more titles than anyone else. He knows how to succeed in modern Formula One, and maybe that Lewis Hamilton energy and the advice that he could give from a driver's point of view would put that team in a better direction. Perhaps that is the missing piece that will turn that into, you know, Ferrari, Jean Todt, Ross Brawn regen. The vibes shout Ferrari, they do. They scream Ferrari. That 1-2 driver combination screams Ferrari, but I just can't bring myself to back them over Mercedes as a team. I just can't. I'm not even a Tifosi, and the amount of times I've backed Ferrari and been let down, I feel somewhat hurt by them, because I really want to see Ferrari succeed, because a team that has that kind of support, I think it's good for F1 that Ferrari do well, because that's an institution. That is a proper team with proper fans that we don't really see with any other team, maybe McLaren somewhat, but other than that, I mean, Ferrari's appeal is they've got it's in your DNA when you're Italian, mate, and I love that. I wish more teams were like that. I hope in time more teams will become like Ferrari, get that support like Ferrari, but I just don't believe they're the ones to give Lewis his 8th world title. Even though you're going to be up against George Russell, I think your better bet is to stay put. And finally, Charlie. Look, I talked about how Lewis's love for Mercedes runs deep, but Charles' love for Ferrari on a personal level, obviously the connections to Ferrari through Gil Bianchi and the love and support they've given him throughout his career, to move away from that for a shot at glory elsewhere, but not a guarantee, it's a risk, man. It's a big risk. No team has the history, the heritage to any driver, but particularly to Charles, particularly his connection. Yet they continuously kind of let him down. Yes, he does somewhat let himself down sometimes, but I think that's more of a product of the car and the team not instilling confidence in him. Like, Charles can't have confidence in Ferrari. Maybe that's why Binotto got shot, because, not literally, obviously, because it felt like, well, how could Charles possibly have had confidence in Ferrari based off of what happened in the tail end of last season? Like, it's crazy. I mean, I almost kind of compare him to Harry Kane at Tottenham, like a world-class player, no question, yet the trophy cabinet is empty because Spurs. West Ham are about to win a Europa Conference League, so I can say that because it's definitely going to happen. Mercedes feel like the more capable team. He would be moving away from a clear 1-2 dynamic, him and Sainz, where he has the advantage, it works best for him. He would be moving into a 1-1 dynamic where I think George would put up more of a fight with Charles. I still think Charles would back himself to outperform George over the course of a season. I would probably say the same as well. I do rate George behind Leclerc ever so slightly, not by much though, not by much at all. And obviously George would have had more time at that team. He'd be more settled at that team. It'd take a bit of time for Leclerc to get used to his new environment. But I mean, just imagine if he gets it wrong. Imagine if Charles moved to Mercedes and then Ferrari ended up turning it around and doing bits and winning every other race, and Mercedes just stayed where they were, 3rd, 4th quickest car, and Leclerc is watching Ollie Behrman win all these races in a Ferrari and he's in a Mercedes. Leclerc's got bad luck, right? We're coming up to Monaco and hopefully he has a good race in Monaco because he deserves one. But that would just be, I can't even fathom how heartbreaking that would be for him. So I almost feel like that fear of getting it wrong would stop him making the move in the first place. Like, in real life, do I think he'd actually move? No, because the potential loss is too high. Whereas he can stay at Ferrari, and even if he doesn't win loads of world titles, he could become a cult icon for his dream boyhood team. So the payoff maybe isn't worth it. But if I think he wants to win a world title, which of course he does, I think Mercedes is a better bet, even alongside Russell, than staying at Ferrari. Because I just don't believe in Ferrari. And I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. I think Mercedes are more likely to catch Red Bull before Ferrari do. So I think he should make the move. But don't try and make me convince him to do it, because that's not going to happen. Let me know in the comments what you think the best choice is from all the 4 perspectives from Mercedes, Ferrari, Charles and Lewis. For the first few hours of the video being out, I will be in the comments below replying. So I'll see you down there. My name's Tommo. Thanks again. Have a good ta-da.